One rainy night in the middle of May, 2003, my friends and I were hanging out at around 9 p.m. We are Navajo, getting water for the livestock in Sunrise, Arizona. We are having a good time, and Tony was driving. I was on the passenger seat, and John and Cody were sitting in the back seat. We were all telling jokes and cracking up until we reached the windmill. Once we'd arrived, we started the water and waited for it to fill the barrel. While waiting, we decided to go walking around looking at the local cows. Unfortunately, this led to the barrel overflowing, at which point John ran to pull the hose. John is a professional sheep herder, by the way. After the situation was contained, we went back, and at this time, I was going to drive. At least, I believed I was, as when I got into the truck it wouldn't start. I tried several times to start the truck, and even looked under the hood to get it to do anything. Nothing was out of place, so I went back into the truck and tried again. Tony, John, and Cody wanted to go mess with the cows, and so they soon left while I continued to work on the truck. While working on the truck, there was a sudden sound that was so loud that it made me jump. I recollected myself after that, thinking maybe it was just the guys throwing rocks to scare the cows. The moment I started working on the truck, I heard the sound once again. I got out of the truck and yelled for the guys to stop making that sound. Soon after, they started to come back. Once they got back to the truck, I asked them if they were throwing rocks at the windmill. They all said no, at which point, I got chills. When we made our way back to the cows, Tony stuck with me. While chilling with Tony, we all heard the sound again. This time, it was a harder hit. Tony yelled to them and told them to stop doing that. The others didn't answer. Usually, they would reply to him pretty quick. He called them once more, but no one yelled back. We got worried, and we started walking out into the dark looking for them. We called out their names, but no one answered. The only light we had was the moonlight, which kept coming in and out of the clouds as we didn't have any flashlights on us at the time. This made it extremely difficult to see. After about 10 minutes, we finally found them. They were on the ground, almost shivering, and their eyes were wide open. Tony and I thought about the worst that could have happened. We have heard stories about these skinwalkers. We have experienced encounters before, but not like this, or at least not with us out here in the open. We knew what we had to do, but we didn't know if there was only one or a few. Then, we heard something scrambling in the bushes nearby. Tony and I freaked out, as soon after we heard it again, but on our right this time. Soon after that, we heard it on our left, and then in front of us, and then behind us. This all happened in about 3 seconds. We got the chills, to say the least. I knew Tony almost always had some Navajo mountain tobacco or blessing cedar to protect us from the skinwalkers, but he didn't have either of it this time. Tony and I made a run to the truck with the half-naked bodies of Cody and John. We heard the footsteps of something running after us as we made it back to the truck, and we all got back in. The second we slammed the door shut, it got unnaturally silent. Soon after this, the witchcraft that the skinwalkers put on Cody and John seemingly wore off. We were just about to relax when some sickly-looking coyotes jumped onto the hood of the truck. There were 3 creatures that had the body of a coyote, but had a little more human-like features. They could walk on their 4 legs, or just their back 2 legs. They had eyes that were crystal and blood red. They had the smell of dead animals. The smell was so unbearable we all fell back into our seat and started to scream in disgust. The creatures started to sing or chant, and we knew they were speaking in Navajo, but we were so terrified we couldn't even tell what they were saying. This was when some tall, long-haired, furry black creature with crystal-like eyes showed up just outside Tony's window, breathing heavily, with the ugliest face we've ever seen. Tony looked at it, and jumped back so quickly and powerfully that he almost knocked down Cody. The creature blew something like powder through the window onto us. We all started to slow our breathing and calm down, and after a matter of seconds it was quiet, and we all passed out. When we woke up the next day, we were face down, ass up, in Tony's bedroom. We never found out what happened to those skinwalkers, or us for that matter. We had a series of ceremonies that were used to protect us from the sickness that the skinwalkers placed upon us. The medicine man told us that the people who did this were after us because of jealousy, They were jealous of us because of all the things we have and all the accomplishments we've done. So, we had their power turned around to backfire on them. After we had the ceremonies, Tony went back to his house and his mom said that night, we just walked through the door about 1:30 a.m., got a glass of water, and went into my room. She also said we were quiet. She thought we were sleeping. To this day, we still hang out with each other. We still get water and take care of the livestock. We will never forget what happened that night. That's for sure. I am an Australian who has spent most of his life surrounded by the bush. This makes me accustomed to all of the weird noises that may come when night falls. This incident occurred one night at around 2:30 a.m. I was watching YouTube with my cat, who was asleep. All of a sudden, I heard a loud shriek, like you would imagine a howler monkey, cross-human shriek would sound like. My cat's head shot straight up, looking out of my window. His back arched up and he started hissing and acting all aggressive. I have decorative rocks outside my window, so when anything walks in it, you can hear the rocks moving. I heard them moving outside, like a person would walk through them. I slowly got up out of my bed and made a crack in my blind so I could get a better look outside. My blood ran ice cold as I saw it. It was about 6 to 7 feet tall. It was completely naked. It was also completely hairless and its eyes were locked onto mine. Its body turned to face me as well, so I was staring directly at it. We stood like that for what seemed like hours, just keeping each other in our sights. I glanced down at the creature's hands. It had a dead cat clasped into its grip, blood dripping from the body. I locked eyes again with it and noticed the creature had a mouth. I don't know why, but that freaked me out the most. It started to turn away, to walk down my road. I rushed to put my jeans and a shirt on. I reached into my cupboard and pulled out a torch and a knife I always have hidden in my room. I opened up my back door and ran down the road. I saw the thing casually stroll into the bush behind my house. It took me about a minute to summon the courage to enter after it. I walked into the bush with the torch and knife in hand. I heard scuttling behind me. I turned around and my torch illuminated a possum. Freaked out, I told it to bugger off. It stared at me blankly. I turned around and walked for another 500 meters or so. That's when I found the cat's body, mangled all to hell. That made me rethink my previous decision. As I turned to leave, all of a sudden I heard that same shriek. I ran as fast as I could, dropping my torch in the progress. I finally made it to the back door. I opened it and ran straight into my room. My cat was looking at me. I patted and passed out of my bed. I woke up the next morning at 10 and strolled out to my kitchen. While I was making my morning coffee, I looked out my window. My jaw dropped, because all along the outside of my wall, there was a deep gash. I called my father, and he came to have a look. He said it looked like when someone drags a screw against someone's car, but this looks too deep to be a screw mark. I thanked him for freaking me out even more. We covered the gash in plaster and went on with our way. I have done some research on what it could possibly be. I kept coming back to the rake, but that is just a creepy story, or at least I thought anyway. I personally think that it was a humanoid creature, but I have no idea what. Thank you for reading this, and if you could help me find out what this is, I would appreciate it.
My grandpa was telling me a story in the summertime, and I guess I never felt the need to share because I didn't know a platform to share it on existed. But now, I've found one in the form of your show and would love to share it. I apologize if some details are left out. I have forgotten some things that he has told me, such as names and what year it happened in. I believe it happened in the 60s. It happened near the Sandy Bay Aboriginal Reserve, which is in southern Manitoba. It was midwinter, and Manitoba gets plenty of snow. My grandpa told me and his two friends, a wife and husband, were walking from their car to their house carrying all of their luggage. It was just their cabin, not their house, so they were carrying the luggage up to the cabin. The first thing they noticed was a bright, bright light shining into the cabin. It illuminated the entire cabin and was a fluorescent shade of icy blue. The husband thought he saw the silhouette of a strange, tall humanoid in the room. It was lanky and very tall, standing alone before it walked out of sight. Quickly, he ran into the house with his wife. They searched the house and there was nothing, so the wife went back out and grabbed more luggage. The husband said he heard a shriek from outside and quickly ran out to make sure she was okay. He was shocked to find her footprints leading up to the car, yet she was about 25 feet away from the car in the woods, with no tracks leading towards her. If she were to walk out there herself, her tracks would be obviously there. He ran out to her. She was distraught and hollering and screaming, and her eyes were glazed over. He took her in and she refused to speak. She was admitted to a mental hospital soon after, and to this day, she has the same glossed over eyes. She still can't speak. She experienced a horrible trauma out there, and I believe it's because of whatever the humanoid creature was. A grandpa still talks to her husband sometimes. I believe he visited her about 30 years ago at the hospital, since he doesn't live too many hours away. If anyone has any theories about this, feel free to let me know in the comments. If there are any more questions, I'll do my best to answer them. This happened roughly a year ago. I have been hunting for 30 years, and in all that time I've never seen something like I saw on this day. I am quite familiar with the woods, and I have no problem handling myself. On this day though, I've been hunting all morning, and it was about noon now. I was beginning to get this eerie feeling like I was being watched, but even more so, stalked. I turned around slowly, and didn't see anything. The forest is normally alive with wildlife and there is generally all sorts of noise. But, at this point anyway, there was absolutely nothing. No shrubbery moving, no birds chirping. It was deafening silence. I continued my hunt, watching closely, hoping to find a deer I could be proud of, a real trophy buck. What I found instead was far more scarier. Looking a short ways away, I almost didn't notice it at first, as it was so still. I saw something staring right at me. This beast, that I mistook for a deer before examining it more closely, stood at 7 foot, 4 inches tall, and his antlers looked like trees. It had the eyes of a cat, was completely silent, even when moving, and it simply just stared at me. Before I knew I had heard a sound to my left, I looked over for a second and saw nothing, and looked back toward the figure only to realize it had vanished. Looking at my phone, I realized it was around 5. Looking at my phone, I realized it was around 5, when it was just noon moments ago. I was supposed to be in from hunting at 1 in the afternoon, but somehow, the time had flown by. I'm not sure what the thing I saw in the woods was, but I'm positive it wasn't a deer. I can't explain the missing time either. Any explanation would definitely be appreciated. In 2007, I was 18 years old and I grew up hearing all about the Michigan Dog Man, and really didn't believe it. I played in the woods a lot as a young kid. One warm fall day, my boyfriend, myself, and 2 friends went out to see my grandmother at her family cabin. When we got there, my 2 younger cousins were there. They wanted to walk down to the river, so we all went, leaving my grandmother to have some alone time without the 2 young boys. As we walked up the hill, the boys wanted to race the 2 older boys. So, when we got to the start of the trail, going to the river, all 4 boys lined up, and I yelled, "Ready, set, go." As the boys ran down, us girls were yelling, "Run, faster, who's going to win?" Just then, a huge buck came out of nowhere. My boyfriend grabbed one of the young boys out of the way. I saw the buck and looked to see where it had come from. See, my family is very into hunting, and we hadn't been quiet by any means. This deer should have heard us long before we were close and ran off before we saw it. As I looked to where it came from, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was like my brain and eyes were fighting to make sense of what was happening. A huge, black dog standing on two back legs was standing there. It looked like a man with a dog's head. It wasn't looking at me. It was looking at my boyfriend. It then looked to be out of breath, like it had been running. I looked at my boyfriend and he was looking at it, but the others were watching the deer. When I looked back, I saw it run back down the hill. I ran up to my boyfriend. His eyes were wide and he looked at me. All he could say was, yes, I saw it too. The young boy and our two friends didn't see it, luckily, so we went to the river and back to the cabin. We left and my boyfriend really didn't want to talk about it. Later that night, some more of our friends came over and all the boys wanted to play Guitar Hero. As they played, I took a picture of them. Now my boyfriend and I live in a very old farmhouse. The windows are floor-to-ceiling windows. They're about 6, maybe 7 feet tall. In one of the pictures, you can see my dog laying on the floor asleep, and all the boys in the picture. Well, it was a week or two after the picture was taken and my friend wanted to see all the pictures I took that night. So I put them on my laptop. She was staring at them when she yelled for me and my boyfriend to come. She zooms in at the top corner of the window was a dog's face with its mouth open. We couldn't believe it. After she left, my boyfriend and I sat there looking at it. Had this thing found us or followed us? Was it mad about the deer? Maybe I'll never know, but it was terrifying. At the time of writing this, it's been 1 day after the incident. My friends, whose name I'll keep private and refer to him as M. So I and my friend M live next door to each other, and I asked him if he wants to go Wendigo hunting in our neighborhood's woods. Being the mischievous teenagers as we were, he said yes. So he arrives in my house and we discuss everything about Wendigos and the paranormal. So with our winter gear on, we head out with a flashlight and an airsoft sniper, which wasn't even loaded, by the way. We were out there for about an hour and decided to call it quits. On the way back, we take a different route on the trail that we've never been before. It's split, so one side is wooded and the other side is open field, and then the trail in the middle. M shines his flashlight to the open field after hearing a screaming noise, and to our horror, we might have seen something that could be a Wendigo. This thing was 7 feet tall at the very least, looked heavily emaciated, and with the most grotesque figure I've ever seen in my entire life. The worst part was its teeth. They looked as though fresh blood were dripping from them. We stood frozen and still and started to slowly back up, but I tripped on M's foot and the airsoft rifle hit the ground, cracking its plastic frame. The creature looked us over and just completely vanished within seconds. We ran home and stayed the rest of the night in my room, terrified for our lives. I still have nightmares about this incident, and I shudder to think what would have happened if that decided to attack us instead of just leave. I'm not sure why it left, but I thank God every day that it did. If it hadn't, we wouldn't exist to tell this tale.
My story takes place 4 years ago, when I was just 14 years old. I wanted to go hunting on our property, which is about 370 acres in total. It took some convincing, but my old man finally agreed that I could go hunting on my own. When it was time to go, I was stoked. I grabbed my molly bag and crossbow before jumping onto my dirt bike and setting off for my hunt. It was about 8 in the morning when I got to my grandpa's property and saw all the no trespassing signs. I ignored these and sprayed doe piss to mask my scent before rushing off to my favorite tree stand. I'm on my way up the tripod when I suddenly hear a loud thump. A tree fell, but thinking it coincidental, I continue my climb. Another tree soon falls and I stop. I'm actually worried and looking into the distance. Suddenly, there is a high-pitched scream in the distance that I have never heard the likes of before. I couldn't describe it too well as I'm kind of deaf almost, and have an implant in my ear that helps me hear as it is. It was when I was almost at the top, I see a monster buck running for its life. I quickly sighed down to grab my crossbow when I suddenly see this huge dog-like figure staring me in the eyes. It's now standing on its back legs. I was too afraid to move when my great-grandfather shows up at an ATV and yells for me to get on. I hop on, and he and I leave. Later on, my hunting pal, I'll keep his name private, mentioned to me a story about a black dog-like figure that would prowl the woods. I believe it was the dog man. And if you ever encounter one, you need to do exactly what me and my grandfather did, and just run. It's the fall of 2017, and my son and I camped in the mountains so we could be there the moment bow season started. We built a small, two-man structure to set in for the night. We then began eating and chilled. Around midnight, we decided it was best to go ahead and hit the sack. Just as we are about to enter our structure, we hear footsteps heading in our direction from the left hillside. 5 minutes pass and we stop hearing what we decide is likely a bear passing through. We crash, and an hour later, we awake to the sound of crashing through the underbrush. We both stared breathlessly in the direction of the crashing, waiting to see a sign of what might be out there. We didn't so much as utter a word while waiting. Soon enough, we see a light cresting over the ridgetop. My first light is, okay, this is someone with a spotlight coming towards us. That's when the light faded, and then reappeared, but this time it was a different color. It went from white to blue, and went out once more. Chills went down my spine as we began moving around for a better look at whatever this thing was. It soon went through the trees, and as it did, it suddenly gained speed and was gone. After a half hour, we gained the confidence and nerve to check out the area it had been in, and also where it had gone. There wasn't a single footprint, even as so much as a disturbed leaf. I'm not sure what this was, but since it first happened, we've experienced many other things just like this. I've heard of things like the lights in the woods, but I never believed in such things. Until now, of course. This happened a few days ago. I was at my friend's house and it was getting late, so I started to walk home. When I got home, I got sent a video from this friend that was a bit strange. Prior to this event, he had told me that he thought someone was stalking him. He said that whenever he was out, this person would appear. The video I got sent was of him running with tears down his face, and he said, "It's her." I didn't quite understand what that meant, so I asked him, "What do you mean by her?" He sent me another video of him running, saying, "The girl that always follows me." Immediately after he sent another video with the camera over his shoulder, and there was a girl with pale skin and black hair crawling on her hands and feet. Her elbows were backward, so she could move faster than a normal person would. I was pretty freaked out by this and tried to send him messages, but none of them would send. It's been a few days and haven't heard anything from him. I'm not sure what to do. Is this some sort of skinwalker or some sort of demon or something from a movie? Is he just pranking me, or is this real life? I don't know, and it's really freaking me out. If anybody could possibly give me advice as to what to do or what this creature could be, I would very much appreciate it. I live in England, and this story happened to me when I was somewhere between 10 to 12 years old. My family and I were on the way back from taking my brother's friend home, and since we had our dog Mickey, we decided to take a shortcut through the woods. Shortly after heading into this small forested area, my dad and brother went on ahead, leaving my mom, our dog Mickey, and I behind to walk on our own. The forest, as I said before, wasn't exactly the biggest. It was a small area that I believe was used as a community area after someone used it for their garden. A few minutes into the walk, and talking about our days, my mom and I realized we could hear something behind us. Looking back, we initially saw nothing, and thought nothing really of it, although it was pitch black outside at this point, and the only real lights came from the occasional car that would meander down the main road a little ways after. After waiting a few more minutes, we finally decided it was probably just an animal and turned and continued on our walk. After a bit of walking, though, we began to hear voices. Creeped out, we sped up to my dad and brother. Mickey had been barking and feeling very weird. The entire feel of the forest was just so unnerving at this point. The voices we heard were definitely not adult, and we can't imagine kids being out so late. We eventually got out of the forested area and decided it'd be better to go back on a normal day. There's something out there, and I'm not going back to find out what.
Nine years ago, I was living on the island of Maui with my family. I took the family dog for a walk pretty late one night since he was restless. It was dark out, so I stuck to the sides of the street. Near the lampposts, my dog stopped and sniffed, so I assumed he had to use the restroom and I waited. I looked around, obviously not wanting to watch him go to the bathroom. While I was looking around in the neighbor's yard, I saw what looked to be a person hunched over, digging. The neighbors had many beautiful plants along their fencing, so I assumed maybe someone was doing late-night gardening. Odd, but so was me being out at like 11 or so walking the dog. I watched, wondering if I should offer help. The person stopped and just stayed there, hunched over. They were very frail, with grossly disproportionately long arms and legs, and I realized that they were naked. It was, as I mentioned, very dark out. They were hairless and still facing towards the home. Their skin was very pale, with a slight, peachy orange color reflecting onto them when the porch light turned on. I thought maybe I was imagining things, but I looked down at my dog again and he was staring over towards it too. I stepped back quietly and hurried him away, checking over my shoulder every now and then. It did not follow us. I don't know if it was really some nutty old person, a fleshgate or something like that. We'd moved very far away, and I think about it every now and then. This following story is my father's. Every other summer, he and some friends go bass fishing in Maine. This particular encounter they had happened around 2 or 3 in the morning. My dad left his tent having to go to the bathroom. As he was relieving himself, he heard a snap about 25 feet away from him. Looking up, he saw nothing initially. There was no animal or human in sight, and things were eerily quiet as he puts it. There were no sounds in the forest as there normally would be. Still, wanting to be sure there wasn't some sort of animal out there that could be a threat, he shined his flashlight into the distance. It was then he saw a pair of eyes in a heavily wooded area. He was too far away to tell exactly how far off the ground they were, so he headed towards the set of eyes. As he did so, whatever was in the woods ran off with a fury. While it was running, my dad was able to get a much better glimpse of it in the clearing. He said it stood no less than 8 feet tall and had an awful smell emanating from it, almost skunk-like. My dad believes it was a Bigfoot, and although he told his friends about the experience the next day, they all agreed to stay the rest of the week together. He had no way to know for sure, but my dad believes it was a curious Bigfoot and wasn't too much of a threat. He didn't feel like it was trying to hurt him, and if it wanted to, it easily could have, right? What are your guys' thoughts on this encounter? My friend and I were hanging out one night when we decided to go into the woods. While searching around, we noticed that all the sounds of wildlife has suddenly disappeared. This is usually a sign a predator is in the area. We walked slowly and carefully as we wandered the forest. Suddenly, we see this tall, lanky figure in the distance, with patches of brown fur. It looked too large to be a human. There was something off about it. We waited to see what it'd do next, when we suddenly noticed it was looking in our direction. Freaked out by this, We hid in some nearby bushes, staying as still as possible. The creature slowly moved by, and when it got really close, I thought we were going to die for sure. Thankfully, a few minutes went by, the longest few minutes of our lives, and whatever this creature was, decided to move on. We waited together, slightly till we were sure the coast was clear. After this, we booked it home and locked the door behind us. We were scared but grateful to be safe. My friend tried to get footage of the creature, but when trying to film it, the creature had a strange distortion and froze up. It hasn't worked since, and my camera is more than likely busted. Ever since this incident, I always hear strange whistling noises and odd sounds through my neighborhood and from the woods. Only late at night though,